All right, now we've been all the way around with our binding. So now we've come to where we're going to end it. Now, as you can see, we've got our bias lines that we cut in the beginning. So in order to piece those two together, and I know there's lots of different ways to do it, but the easiest way for me is to find my end and my point right here, and then I'm going to come up a 1/2 inch because that allows for my seam allowance. And then I come up here and find this corner and come up above that a 1/2 inch. So that allows for my seam allowance. There's my angle and my corner. So I'm just going to cut that off, and then I'm going to go back and sew that together, just as I have the rest of them. You can see that we just overlapped them. And there's my all right, there we go. And you can see right there is where we're going to sew that together. Now, this little seam right here is kind of bulky where these tails are. So I just trim those off to a little angle. And I do this all the way around when I'm sewing my bias, or when I'm sewing the binding down. You can see that those little ears, they're just kind of a big nuisance. So if they're in the way and they kind of bug you, just cut them off. So all right, then we're just going to sew this down, and then our binding will be all the way around, and we'll do our top stitching. If you are using a walking foot, it really is easier to sew your binding on with the walking foot. It does seem to help it get through, but as you can see, it worked out very nicely without it. Now, I like to use the serpentine stitch to finish it off. The serpentine stitch is the one that it's like a zigzag, only it's a round zigzag, and it's a whole bunch of little stitches in a row. And it gives it a little wider and a little tighter finish. I like to fold my excess over. I pull it up tight, tuck on my excess, and then I like to put it so that it's just barely over that stitching line right there. If it comes just over that, then you don't see that line, and that little stitch that you're doing on the other side stays in the binding and doesn't go down into the quilt. So let's try that, and then we'll look at it. Now notice that I'm going to pull this just a little bit as I go through. I've got my pressure up to 0. It's got a little bit of tension on it, but not a lot. But this is really thick, and so your feed dogs are not going to be able to push that through. So you can push it and pull it kind of at the same time. I kind of use my elbow and I kind of pull on it with my hands. And I'm sure you know just how to wrestle with it according to your machine, but know that you do have to pull it through to make it work. Go just a little farther here. Okay, now you can see that that little stitch kind of goes back and forth, goes right to the edge, and it really is secure. You're not going to wear this binding out, and it's not going to tear off. It's going to be really nice, and it's stitched really securely on the edges. Minkee quilts wash really well, and so you want it to be as stable as it can be, and so I choose to do it this. A zigzag or another decorative stitch probably would work just as well. So then our quilt is finished.